You're wondering if Metaphor ReFantazio is worth it, so I'll make this plain and simple. Metaphor ReFantazio is the game of the year. In this review, I'm going to break down each aspect to help you understand why it's one of the highest rated games of the year and receiving so much praise from everybody. I am giving away a free copy of Metaphor ReFantazio on Twitter, but for those of you that don't have a Twitter account, I'm going to be doing a separate giveaway, and all you have to do to enter is comment what you're most excited for about Metaphor ReFantazio on this video. This is going to be an Xbox key that is provided by the lovely people over at Sega and Atlas, so thank you to them for allowing me to give away another key to our community. If there's something you want to hear more on specifically, feel free to use the timestamps, but for now, we're going to get into my thoughts on the story. We're going to get into my thoughts, but a quick spoilerless overview for those of you that aren't familiar with the story is essentially there's a kingdom of Uchronia and its king is assassinated by a military general named Luis, and this triggers a royal magic that starts an election where anyone in the country is able to become the next king, but you have to be voted for by the people. So you start your journey as the main character to kind of corral favor, so that way you can take the throne and help your childhood friend who is actually the prince who is under a dark spell that you can only break by winning this election. Now there are several different tribes and pretty much all of them are discriminated against, and us as the main character are a part of one of those tribes, and so this is going to be a very important thing as we attempt to corral favor from other people within the kingdom. But now I want to get into my thoughts on the story, and I'm not going to be going into any specific events or anything like that. I mainly want to highlight the execution. There's a lot of games that attempt to tackle topics like discrimination, but they really fumble or they don't dive as deep into things as they can. It's simple to create a world that incorporates prejudice, but where these games start to fumble is the emotion and the response from the recipient of those said inequalities. This is where so far Metaphor ReFantazio has shined, highlighting almost every type of emotional response that you can think of that could be invoked when you're experiencing prejudice. Discrimination is front and center at every stage of Metaphor, whether you're walking around town or if you're attempting to help somebody. Before they allow you to do that, they're going to do everything short of calling you a slur before they actually take your help. It sounds like a bit much, but it really does drive the themes home and allows you to feel immersed. I never thought that I'd be celebrating a game allowing me to be immersed in people being racist against me. But you know, here we are, and I believe being able to execute that in itself is a feat. So I wanted to highlight the writing as much as possible because this topic and subject matter could have went terribly wrong if executed poorly. I think straying outside of the high school setting with the Persona formula is going to be a money maker for Atlas. I know they have Shin Megami Tensei, and I don't really know how to put this into words, but Metaphor ReFantazio just invokes a bigger urge to get people to try it out. When I ask people who haven't played SMT5 why they haven't, the common response I get is because we're in the desert the whole time. But I feel like Metaphor combats that specific narrative exactly, and I know there's other SMTs, but like I said, I can't really put into words what it is about Metaphor ReFantazio that feels different, but it just seems like it's going after a bigger target audience. We're going to get into combat next, but if you are looking to try out Metaphor ReFantazio, I'm going to have a ton of guides releasing in the next few days to help you get started on your journey, so make sure that you're subscribing to the channel, and I really would appreciate it if you help me get this video to 100 likes. But now let's move into discussing combat and gameplay. For combat, Metaphor ReFantazio uses the Shin Megami Tensei press turn system for turn-based combat, and a system similar to Trails Through Daybreak for its open world combat. I have a video where I go into extreme detail about these systems, so I won't spend too much time discussing them here, but I will have it linked at the end of this video if you want to check it out. But I do feel that this combination makes exploring dungeons much faster, allowing you to get along to the next story bit or highlight the more challenging fights. For side quests or bounties you're over-leveled for, the open world combat is godsend. Now with Metaphor, you're free to explore the dungeons from the main story, side quests, or bounties at each town in any order you want, as long as you complete your main story objective within the time allotted for you. Now, depending on which you choose to tackle first, things can either be significantly easier or much more difficult. So your experience with a specific dungeon is going to vary significantly from the next person's if they decided to take one of the harder dungeons first before they went into the main story dungeon. Now in Persona you had the Velvet Room, but in Metaphor ReFantazio we have the Academia. And here's where you're going to be able to access your archetypes. And essentially these work as a class system. And I know in previous Atlas titles, generally only the main character had customization. So this is a much welcome change where you can equip any different archetype, and I'm going to refer to them as classes, to any different character. Now each character is going to have to learn the class. It's not something that transfers between all characters. So each person is going to have a different archetype mastery. And the way that this is set up is we have 14 different base archetypes. And after mastering that class and investing in the associated social link, you're going to unlock the next stronger form of that lineage. And so we have the mage, and right now I have the mage mastered, so I was able to evolve to a wizard. And once I get my Gallica social link to rank 8, I get the assassin class to 10 and wizard mastered. I'm going to be able to unlock this next archetype. Now each archetype is going to have different benefits in combat as well as in the open world. And a really cool thing that they've done with Metaphor is that if you're investing in that specific social link that's associated with that archetype, so in our example earlier, it was Galaga for Mage, you're going to be able to inherit abilities from other archetypes and transfer them to the archetype that you have equipped. So right now, these are the skills that I have on the Mage, and then I can equip a skill, let's say from the Warrior class to the Mage. And so I'd be able to do the Diagonal Slash, and have access to all of the skill list from the mage abilities. I feel like this is a really cool system, and this allows you to get even more customizable with your playthrough and your gameplay strategy. And this one is just one, but the more you invest, you unlock more. And I think it goes up to 3 or 4 once you have that specific social link maxed out. So I've been mainly playing the warrior, and I've taken some of the buffs from other classes and inherited them to that class. So that way I can buff up my party without having to have a dedicated buffer in my party. Now that might change later once I get stronger and get to the end game, but that's just an example of how this inherited ability can be used to make your archetype unique. Now I want to talk about how Metaphor has taken the Persona formula and attempted to evolve it from Persona 5. Now the first thing is going to be the calendar system. With Persona 5 and Persona 3 Reload, I feel like there was a little bit, it was like a slow burn where there was kind of a pacing issue where there would be a long duration of time before the next main story event. But during that, you would go and you would invest in your social links or get your social stats up. But there would be times where I'd feel like, okay, let me just do this so I can get to the next main point of the story. With Metaphor ReFantazio, that has never been the case. They give you a generous amount of time to complete the main objective, but it's not enough to where you're like, wow, I really didn't need these extra X amount of days. It feel like the pacing has been boom, next story point, boom, next story point, boom. But you also had enough time to invest in your social links and learn more about the rest of the party. Now, speaking of social links and the rest of the party, let's get into that. The social link writing, like from a writing standpoint, has just been amazing. I haven't done a single bonding event that I didn't feel like, wow, this was written extremely well and I enjoyed this with any character, no matter if they're in the main party or if they're just a side character. Every story has been compelling. Now, where I'm at least, it looks like they've gotten rid of that stat system where you got, 3 hearts if the character liked what you said and you had to build that up to get to the next level. It looks like every time you hang out with the character, you're going to unlock the next rank. But at times they do become gated by the story to stop you from flying through and progressing too fast. So I haven't had any repercussions from choosing the right answer and then having to hang out with the character where nothing happens. I just have to do it to catch up for choosing the wrong answer. Now they did shift that system to the next side of the Persona formula we're going to talk about, and that's going to be the daily activities to raise your royal virtues, or in Persona it will be known as your social stats. Choosing the correct answers here do matter, and they affect how many points you're going to be credited to leveling up that social stat that you're investing in. Now, where they've taken this specific system and evolved it is every single daily activity story has also been compelling and the writing has been well. I'm about 25 hours in, and I don't think I've seen a repeat instance where I did something and it was the same exact story. Most of the times when I repeated something, the story evolved a little bit from that last point, as opposed to like Persona, where when you want to get your charm up, you just go do an activity, you fast forward through, you don't really have to pay attention to it, you get the stats. With Metaphor, you have to pay attention because you're going to have to choose the right answer to get the maximum amount of stats. And it kind of breaks that mold where during the day, you do your social links, during the night, you do your social stats, and you just repeat that loop as much as you can. With Metaphor, you can't really have that mindset. And a big factor is another point where Metaphor takes it forward is going to be that you're on a journey where you're traveling from town to town, and you also have to factor in time when it comes to doing activities. If you want to go clear this dungeon, it could take 2 to 3 days for you to get to the dungeon to clear it. So I have to map that into the timeline that I have for my main objective. And the fact that you're constantly moving from town to town stops things from being the same constant cycle of mundane activities. Each town is going to come with new activities to gain X social stat that's going to have its own story, new bounties, and new dungeons for you to clear, in addition to the actual overarching story. So I've given you an overview of what to expect with Metaphor ReFantazio. Now I want to go over my personal pros and cons, but we're going to start with the pros. The first, you probably could have guessed it, is going to be the writing. I feel like I keep saying this, but like it's just so good. Down to the activities, the social links, the actual story, and setting up the world, it's just perfect. I feel like I'm not in a rush to get to the next big bit of the main story because I'm having such a good time in the town that I'm in, or with whatever subplot that I'm doing within that town. I'm not necessarily always thinking or caring about that overarching election that we're on the journey to do, because in this town, we're investigating this issue, and it's so well thought out and written that I just want to figure out what's going on here. And I feel like with a lot of other JRPGs, it's easy to get the game, you're going to see the overarching mission, and you just know the story. I'm going to do this for 90% of the game, I'm going to get a curveball at the end, and I'm going to go fight a god. I feel like sometimes with those games, it's hard to enjoy the actual story because they're not really well written, and so you're just constantly thinking about going to end the journey. You're not necessarily enjoying the actual journey with your cast, which leads me into my next pro, and that's going to be the party. Oh my god. We just like, there's just so many wholesome moments that happen that are just like, wow, I'm really enjoying this, and this is just like a side activity. Or when I'm doing the social links and I'm learning more about Stroll, or I'm learning more about Hulkenberg or Heisme, and getting into like their reasoning for why they are the way they are and how they've come to join us in our journey to win this election, it's just so compelling. I feel like I'm bought in, and there's not a single person in the party so far where I'm like, I don't really care about their social link. I don't care about their story. I'll figure it out eventually when I do. I feel like I'm struggling to figure out who I want to bond with more because I want to know more about each of their journeys. Now, at times we're written into these crazy funny situations, and I'm trying to figure out what is it exactly about this situation that's making it as enjoyable to me. The answer that I came to majority of the time was the performance of the voice acting and the music. The music, it's not like Persona where you have these jazzy, catchy tracks, or these like that you're gonna listen to outside of the game, or you have these godly OSTs like we have in the combat with Metaphor, where they have the orchestra or the symphonies singing in the background. It's just like that chill song that you don't necessarily notice, but when you pay attention, you learn that this specific song is affecting my mood. It's making me sad, which is in line with the story, or it's making me feel like I'm having fun with my friends, which is in line with the story, but it's not clashing with the voice acting or the writing or the moment. But I feel like without that music, it doesn't set the ambiance for this moment to be funny, for this moment to be wholesome, or to evoke emotion within me when I'm experiencing this moment. So I know that there's a lot of attention on the combat OST because, I mean, it is fire, but I think that some of the OSTs that are set in the moments that you're not necessarily thinking about the music are a big pro for me when I try to peel it back and understand, why am I enjoying my time with this party so much? The next two I'm going to hit pretty quick because we talked about them in depth with the actual video. The first is the archetype system. I just like having build diversity and being able to try all these different types of wacky and wonky builds, which I'm sure the community is going to find. And then the last pro that I have is the Persona formula. I feel like they've taken it and they've evolved it so much, and it's just become even more enjoyable, where I thought that it wouldn't be able to advance as much. They'd already mastered it with Persona 5. They found a way to evolve it even more, and it has me even more excited for what Persona 6 has to offer. Now let's get into the cons. The first con, and probably the biggest one that I saw, is that the aesthetic of the game sometimes can have just too much going on. I've heard that to some people it made them nauseous, but that personally hasn't been my experience. However though, my only personal complaint about the game is in a similar vein, and that is the blur when you're sprinting hurts my eyes so much. I was holding off on talking about it in my demo review because I was hoping there would be a setting to turn it off in the actual main game, but I haven't been able to find one. But that's really the only complaint I had about the game, which says a lot. So these are my thoughts on Metaphor ReFantazio. I'm gonna have a ton of guides releasing over the next few days, but right here I'll have that video link that I mentioned earlier giving you tips for combat. Thank you guys for your time, and I'll catch you in the next one.